Welcome to the Progress Texas Happy Hour.
Welcome back to the Progress Texas Happy Hour. I'm Progress Texas Advocacy and Development Coordinator Tatum Owens. If you're visiting a national park this summer, listen up. Overflowing trash, dirty bathrooms, long waits in line for emergency services, and closed trails. That's what you can expect because of national staff shortages exacerbated by deep Doge cuts to our National Park Service and Bureau of Land Management. Did you know that one park ranger covers hundreds of acres of land each? And now, with a more than 10% slash across budgets, that number has grown with less people to cover the maintenance. Our park rangers are under attack, and our parks up for grabs. These lands belong to all of us, not corporations and billionaires. We need to make it clear that we love our shared lands and waters and want to see them protected, not sold to the highest bidder. As part of our larger Progress Texas summer vacation, we're covering the threats to our national parks, from exacerbated staff shortages to how Trump's budget bill could create the largest public land sale in modern history, so billionaires can cut you out of America's best idea and keep the views to themselves. Today, we are joined by Cristóbal López, the National Parks Conservation Association's Texas Field Representative. Cristóbal, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Tatum. I'm happy to be here.
So am I. So to start us off, would you please give our audience a review of the National Park System and service? What's the history of our national parks? In your words, why are they so important? I'd also love to hear how that's intertwined with Texas culture and our historic sites.
Yeah, absolutely. So the National Park Service was founded in 1916 under the Organic Act to preserve our country's cultural and natural landscapes. Typically with the natural landscapes, what comes to mind are the big 63 national parks. So these are the Yosemites, the Yellowstones, the Big Bends, the Grand Canyons, the Rocky Mountain National Park, right? Those are, when you think about the National Park Service, a lot of people, that's what comes to mind first. But our National Park Service preserves so much more than that. There's 433 units of the National Park Service, and over 2/3 of those are history and culture sites, like San Antonio Mission's National Historical Site or National Historical Park, like Blackwell School National Historic Site, like Fort Davis National Historic Site. All three are here in the state of Texas. So as I said, the National Park Service preserves both our natural landscapes and our cultural landscapes as well. What that means for Texas has 18 total units of the National Park Service, 2 big NP national parks, Big Bend National Park and Guadalupe Mountains National Park. But we also have so many history and culture sites as well. And I think that blend of natural landscapes and cultural landscapes really makes our parks here in the state really special.
Thank you for sharing that. I'd love to talk a little bit about why we're here today. You're the Texas Field Representative, so let's discuss what's going on at the ground level, real impacts to our national parks. Take a look at the past 6 months and the havoc that co-president Elon Musk wreaked for a minute there against many federal agencies, including the National Park Service. We've heard that staff shortages, that's rangers, scientists, and cultural stewards, are causing reduced maintenance of the parks, putting multiple employees' jobs onto the leftover few and overburdening already understaffed programs, jeopardizing park visits and safety. This is the most favored federal agency by the public, and it's also an incredibly good investment as an economic driver for local communities, making up less than 1% of federal budget funding and giving back $15 for every dollar invested, with demand only increasing by the millions. So then why did Doge cut 13% of the budget and lose 2,500 jobs nationally for the NPS, when Texas visitors exceeded 5 million, created more than 4K jobs, and brought $488 million for just the Texas economy? Cristóbal, please tell us how the Doge cuts have impacted our already understaffed national parks and staff.
Yeah, so we're seeing impacts. We're seeing the impacts to those cuts across the country. As you mentioned, our national parks are already underfunded. They're already understaffed. Here in Texas, we have many parks, especially out west. Many parks are operating, with 50 to 60% staff. Already, before the Doge staff cuts, they were already understaffed. And now these understaffed sites are already losing employees that are front facing. So, your park rangers and your park interpreters, but also back staff, back facing staff. So people who work in the back, curators, historians, biologists, maintenance workers, people who aren't necessarily forward facing are also being lost as well. And these are people who are extremely critical in the preservation of these sites. So kind of what we've been seeing in the last few months is a reduction in programming. Big Bend National Park unfortunately had to cut almost all of their public-facing programming because of staff shortages. Recently, I know it was reported in the news that Big Bend lost their superintendent as well as their chief of interpretation. These are extremely damaging cuts to the overall operations of sites like Big Bend. And as I mentioned, other sites like Chamizan National Memorial is operating at about 60% staff. Fort Davis National Historic Site is operating at about 50 to 60% staff. Blackwell School National Historic Site, which was just established last year, does not have any dedicated staff for that site because of the because of the federal hiring freeze, which was enacted earlier this year. So because of that hiring freeze, they can't hire full-time staff. So the site, even though it's been established for almost a year, it'll be a year this month, has no staff, no dedicated staff, and it's only open on the weekends. So what they're having to do is pull rangers from other sites, to open that site 2 days out of the week. But what that does is you're already, you're pulling resources and staff from sites that desperately need from sites that need that staff and those resources. So those are just some of the impacts that we're seeing across the country that have been affecting our national parks.
And thank you for that localized perspective as well. One of the things that we're talking about in this larger series is how it's not just a Texas problem, it's a national problem. There are national parks, right? And we pointed out how one specific example is up in the Pacific Northwest, you can lose the one plumber on the park, and that makes a difference. And so I'd also love to hear about so these staff shortages, what have they resulted in? What are some of the stories, things that you've heard?
So, kind of what we've heard and what we've seen across our national share in the state is those impacts to public programming that really elevate the visitor experience. Going to learn from them, who are the experts, about the natural and cultural landscape that you're in, really just adds so much to your visitor experience. So the fact that parks like Big Bend are having to cut that back because they're short on staff is really it's an unfortunate thing to see. And another thing that we're hearing from different rangers across the state is just forward facing, we're seeing that lack of programming, the cutback on programming, and stuff like that. But the rangers themselves are really feeling it on a personal level. It's affecting them. It's affecting their work morale. And, unfortunately, we're also seeing rangers across the state leave the agency because they just feel like, what is the purpose anymore? I have a close friend of mine who's a park ranger who recently left the Park Service as well because, in his own words, he was tired of fighting. He was tired of every day coming to work and be a struggle. So that's, those are some of the things that we're seeing across the state that have really been affecting our parks.
Thank you for that introduction to our topic today. Next, would you please bring our listeners up to speed? Donald Trump has a self-imposed deadline of July 4th for Congress to pass his budget bill, which would slash away at crucial public goods, including Medicaid, NPR and PBS, and yes, our national parks. But only 63 out of the 433 would remain funded, leaving historic sites up to state control. To cut the proposed $900 million, y'all have assessed that NPS will have to eliminate the budget for more than 350 park units, more than 75% of the park system. There is no authority for the administration to give parks to the states, the majority of which were created by congressional action. Meanwhile, one part of the proposal also puts millions of acres of land up for public sale, to be bought up for development and drilling and who knows what else. As we record, the Senate has narrowly passed the package back to the House, despite bipartisan uproar. What's at stake here with the budget bill regarding our national parks and public lands? And please share how it relates back to Texas.
So in May, the President Trump administration released his skinny budget, which had absolutely devastating cuts to the National Park Service. One of those being a $900 million cut to the National Park Service operational budget. What this would do is cut staffing, cut absolutely critical National Park Service programming. And it would be one of the largest cuts, if not the largest cut that we have ever seen to the National Park Service. As you mentioned, what it could also do is lead to the closure of over 350 units of the National Park Service, with the agency only focusing on these 63 big NP national parks. As I mentioned, under the Organic Act of 1916, the Park Service was founded to preserve both natural and cultural landscapes. Another challenge that we've seen be brought up with the presidential skinny budget is them wanting to transfer our history and culture sites to state agencies. So in Texas, what that would mean is that historic and culture sites like San Antonio Missions National Historical Park would be transferred to the Texas Historical Commission and Texas Parks and Wildlife. But those agencies don't have the budget to take on sites like our national parks that are at risk of being transferred. So that proposal really it doesn't make sense. It doesn't line up. The resources really aren't there for those to be transferred. And really, our national parks here in the state of Texas, especially our history and culture sites, are nationally significant. Their histories, the stories that they preserve are, important to our nation's fabric. And they deserve to be nationally recognized. These sites really were made of Texans who wanted their story, to be elevated on a national stage. And that's important. We see that it's important, and Texans came together to make these sites. So they're important, for us as well, because we see them as being, sites of our Texas history on a national stage as well. So yeah, the presidential skinny budget, it proposes just so many devastating cuts that we as an organization are completely against.
Progress Texas podcasting director Chris Mosier here. Independent, public, fact-based media is under direct attack by the Trump administration and congressional Republicans. Why? Because we dare to speak truth to power. We don't fire our staff members for expressing their own views. We don't shy away from what's really happening out of fear. As we all know, information is power, and once the truth is silenced, we're all powerless. Progress Texas relies on funding from our listeners and viewers to keep shining a light on the truth in Texas. If you've come to rely on Progress Texas, please support us. We don't do subscriptions or paywalls because the media we produce is important for everyone to be able to see and hear, but it can't continue without you. Please become a regular, sustaining monthly supporter of Progress Texas right now at progresstexas.org/donate.
People have been coming together and finding respite in national parks for over a century. I think John Muir noted this best, quote, "Everybody needs beauty as well as bread, places to play in and pray in, where nature may heal and cheer and give strength to body and soul alike." Moving on from that quote, is there anything good that is coming from this situation? Do you see rangers or visitors joining together, or relentless dedication on the part of the staff? Any human stories that you think can add some hope to what is a kind of hopeless situation?
Yeah, absolutely. So we definitely have seen, people across the country come together to speak up for our national parks. National parks, time and time again, are voted as the number one most favored federal government agency. Time and time again. And we've seen that here recently. We've seen how much our national parks mean to people, and them coming together and really speaking out for our national parks. Even here locally, we've really been able to partner with some of our local partners in San Antonio to go to DC and advocate, for our national parks, and advocate to our San Antonio and Texas delegations about how important these sites are to the state, but also to local communities. So we've been able to go to DC with some of our partners and advocate, and we've been able to go to Austin as well with some of our supporters and volunteers to go advocate for our national parks. So we have been seeing tremendous support, and like I said, people from across the country just speaking out for our national parks, even on social media as well. You see so many pages on Instagram and on X, speak out for our national parks, share resources, share what other people can do to help speak out. And that really is incredible to see how many people come together to speak out for our national parks. So totally we have seen, more and more people come together, people reaching out to us as well, asking us, how they can help, what resources can we provide as an organization to help them advocate. So we've definitely have seen an increase in that.
I love to hear that. And I think that that's been true across the board, from the outrage at the Doge cuts and also to the current cuts proposed by the budget bill, whether that's to the national parks or NPR and PBS. You've seen a wide response of people saying, I'm not going to back down. This is something that's important to me and that people have invested in for decades as a public good. It's important.
And one thing, to add is here recently, Senator Mike Lee, wanted to propose the sell-off of public lands. And that's a great example of different groups, coming together to speak out for that. Because we had, quote unquote green groups, of course, speak out against that. But we also had hunting groups speak out against that. We had hunting and fishing groups speak out against that. So we're seeing, different groups coming together to speak out against our attacks on our public lands.
And we know that the Senate just passed the reconciliation bill on the note of that. So first, to the core mission of your organization, conservation. There are huge long-term costs to policy decisions like these, from cuts to grant programs trying to mitigate the cost of climate change on these fragile ecosystems, to rivers drying up or suffering algal blooms, leading to the death of a family dog in one situation. This budget proposal specifically promotes expanded oil and gas drilling and greenlights selling off millions of acres of public lands with no public process or environmental review. It's there and it's irreversible, and it will put the landscapes around our parks even more at risk. We've already talked about how people don't realize that historic sites are underneath the purview of the National Park Service. So on the note of that, what do you think gets left out of the conversation there?
As I mentioned, right, many of our national parks are cultural and historic landscapes. With the recent attacks on the Antiquities Act, which the presidential administration is now arguing that they can revoke the designation of national monuments, many of our national monuments are also history and culture sites. So, with the attack on the Antiquities Act, right, we're seeing the threats of possibly increased, land being sold off for mining, for drilling, which is just absolutely terrible to see. Whenever we say not 1 inch, right, we mean not 1 inch, right? We want to see all of these lands in totality protected. And that's definitely, the natural side, though, the challenge to our natural landscapes that we're seeing, right? Our national monuments that preserve our natural landscapes. But one of the other, the sides of the same coin is the possible attacks on our history and culture national monuments, right? One of the things that we've seen is Stonewall, for example, Stonewall National Monument up in New York. We've already seen an attack on how they're able to interpret the history of that site with the removal of trans from really anywhere on the park, from anywhere on the park website. We've just seen that the word terminated, right? And that is silencing that history and the impact of that community, that they had on that site. So many of history and cultural national monuments, which were also designated by the Antiquities Act, those are at risk. Emmett Till, which was recently designated Emmett Till National Monument, that site that tells that important history could also be under attack if the president is given the authority to remove designations of national monuments. So it isn't just the natural landscapes, right? Yes, those are under attack. Yes, they're at threats of drilling, mining. But the ability for our national monuments to also tell our important history as a country is also under attack. And that's something, as these conversations are being had, when people are talking about the impacts to our national monuments, there's also a possibility that our history and culture national monuments could also be under attack as well.
I think that brings us to the end of our conversation. So thank you for joining us today, sharing this vital work with our audience. And I want to ask, what actions should our audience take, noting that the budget has passed in the Senate? Should folks reach out to their U.S. reps again? And if you have anything else to share.
Absolutely. We have seen the power that our collective voices can have. The most recent example is Senator Lee, removing the sell of all the public lands that he was proposing. Him feeling the pressure of our public voices really is a testament to what we can do if we come together and really speak out. Sometimes it sounds cliche, right? Whenever you hear it all the time, call your senator, call your representative. but it does make a difference. Them hearing from their constituents, makes a difference, and everyone's voice makes a difference in this effort. So if you can call your local representative, if you can call your local senator, if you can send them an email, send them a postcard, whatever it may be. But, what we need now and what the National Park Service needs now is people to really speak out for them, because they unfortunately can't do it for themselves. So they're relying on us. They're relying on the people who go to these national parks, who enjoy them, who love going there and going to hike and to learn about the history, whatever it may be. They're relying on us. And it really is up to us to speak out and to ensure that our national parks are protected, are funding, and they have everything needed to continue to protect our natural and cultural landscapes. So yes, absolutely. Call your local representative, call your senator, and just, speak out against the presidential skinny budget, speak up for our national parks, and really urge them to provide the funding and resources that our parks need.
Thank you, Cristóbal López with the National Parks Conservation Association, for joining us. No one is excluded from our national parks currently, but Musk, Trump, and Senate Republicans want to cut you out. Not everyone can go to Disneyland and summer vacation, but everyone can visit with Smokey the Bear. Speak up now and join friends fighting this authoritarian encroachment on our cherished, sacred sites across the country, full of sprawling lands and rivers, yes, but also crucial historical landmarks that they want to censor and erase. Only you can prevent national park cuts and the sale of our public lands. Here at Progress Texas, we're in the business of countering the conservative disinformation machine that's largely responsible for the election of Donald Trump. But while that machine is funded by oil billionaires, tech billionaires, religious right-wing groups, and more, we rely mostly on everyday Texans who value our hard work and share our belief that a Texas that works for everybody is a Texas we want to live in. Thanks to Betty Ferguson, Francis Ferguson, and Lavelle Ferris for their valued and ongoing support. Go to progresstexas.org/donate. And thank you for listening and all you do to press progress forward here in the Lone Star State. See you next time. Bye, y'all.
The Progress Texas Happy Hour is a production of Progress Texas, a rapid response media organization promoting progressive messages and actions. Find us online at progresstexas.org and on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. The podcast is produced by me, Chris Mosier, and our featured music is by Walker Lukens. Please be sure and subscribe to the Progress Texas Happy Hour on the podcast platform of your choice. Take a moment to leave us a review if you've enjoyed the show, and be sure and tell your friends about us. Thanks for listening and for all you do to press progress forward here in the Lone Star State. We'll see you again next week.